format for the week. You guys are going to love this. So we're just going live on YouTube. I'm going to continue with the button pushing for a moment and things like that. And then we're going to get everybody to introduce themselves very briefly. And then we're going to start hauling ass through this so that we can maximize our time. And of course, do something both educational and fun on a Friday lunchtime session in what it's, oh, there's Matt. Fun. Here we go. We thought for sure you weren't joining us because I was talking about coming over to your house and hiding your wallet on top of the fridge.
Yes, that is a problem. That's where I hide all of the really fancy stuff because I know nobody can reach it often. So.
And that's where I hide all of the sharp objects away from toddlers.
There you go.
So toddlers and tiny people, yes.
Yeah,
they're pretty much the same.
Same thing, actually. I'm basically a toddler. Maturity level and height.
We're still going. We're actually live on YouTube right now, so I'm loving how this conversation has started. Fantastic, right? But I did ask him for t-shirt size really quick to get him some MCC t-shirts. He's like, whatever the largest size is at Gap Kids. I'm like, I love it, right? There we go. Well, we'll make sure to get some of those. Anyway, but ladies and gentlemen, welcome. This is the MCC Virtual Business Box Lunch. I am your host, Mitch Camage, the Savage in Business. We're going live on YouTube. You'll see me looking over everybody's collective digital shoulder from time to time just to be able to go, yeah, I got to push a button or answer somebody or whatever else. And as always, I've got my brothers from other mothers, Paul and Matt, riding shotgun with me, and a panel of business owners just like you, people from inside a syndicate. They get the invite, get a chance to come in, whatever else, to put together our studio audience, if you will, but they participate straight up. And what we do is we talk about the week that was in business. Now, usually every week until this week, I come with a theme, an idea, an agenda, 2 or 3 topics I want to get everybody's input on. In fact, we've even started some good arguments, even though everybody stayed civilized. So yay, go team. It's good for entertainment. It's good for information, but more than that, it's educational. Why? Because everybody on here right now is a business owner just like you. They're just trying to pay the bills, pay their employees, make a little more money, keep a little more money, avoid paying more money, etc. All the things that we go through on a regular basis. So we bring people together, talk about the stuff that we all go through on a week-to-week basis. Sometimes it's timely because of situation. Of course, we've had the word COVID come up a few times. Of course, it's situational based on what's going on in the environment. Once more, I'm very cautious to say this is not a conversation about politics or anything else, but merely the environment that's created because something has happened, etc. This week, we're going to make a small deviation because what I'm going to do is I'm going to be asking my panel for something big that they have gone through this week. And we're going to get everybody to talk about that. Fix it, solve it. Because the one thing that I have seen over years, and so while we're live here for a moment, yesterday was the official anniversary, 8 years since I started this journey as a business coach. Yesterday was the day where I got fired by the last person that ever signed my paycheck. And now we're sitting here 8 years later. So 8 years later, 400 companies that I've worked with directly tells me that time and time again, we see the same problems, different shades, different colors, different shape, but ultimately the same problems that come up all the time. And so when we deal with things as we do, first of all, because we think we're clever enough, we can fix all of our own problems. Second, when we can't, we get frustrated. And third, my AirPods are being choppy. See, there we go. Here's a problem for the week. My AirPods are not connecting to my Bluetooth appropriately, and I'm getting some stuttering noise in and out. So give me a moment. We're going to fix that problem. So I want the panel to focus for a moment. I'm going to switch my, to wired instead. Think about it for a moment, but we're going to start with Ashley. And Ash and I have known each other very, very well. She's deeply involved in our community over at Syndicate as well, and she runs a fantastic HR firm. Let's start with Ashley. Ashley, why don't you introduce yourself, talk just for about 10 seconds about who you are, and let's run across. So on my screen, I got Ashley, and I got Paul, and then after Paul, I got Justin. So there's the first 3 of you. Let's do this, and hopefully I'll have this done in a second. Let's go.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having this, Mitch. This has been a great conversation to join every week. Closes out the week in a really good way. As Mitch said, I'm Ashley. I own and operate Involvi Consulting, and we are an HR consulting firm. So I have lots of stories and lots of things that I can share in terms of what we've been going through with some of our clients. And the way that we've been able to help them. But yeah, that's who we are, Paul.
Sorry, just responding to a message there. Getting that out. So yeah, switch gears. Woo. It's been a crazy week. Things have, I think things last week were crazy and things this week are crazy. So, it's that mental stretch, those synaptics firing and making those different connections. So the mental wear can be really tough. There's physical exhaustion and then there's mental exhaustion. And I don't know, but for me, I find mental exhaustion more taxing. It takes a little bit longer to recover. So for me, it's trying to find those spots where I can actually disconnect and don't have to be tethered to the phone or, reacting as soon as it buzzes. So, for me, it's more the calendar. Let's set up the calendar more effectively so you can have that downtime and kind of go from there.
Justin?
Yeah, this week has been fantastic. I own and operate, I'm a partner with Global Debt Technologies. We've got 2 platforms that are being rolled out. One of them went live officially yesterday in our soft launch. Walked on cloud 9, had an absolutely beast of a meeting. It was supposed to be 30 minutes, turned into an hour and 20 minutes of nothing but ongoing questions and answers, which leads into an accelerated launch across the border. So yeah, it's been one hell of a good week.
Fantastic. After Justin, we got Gary. Gary, let's get a little intro on you.
Hey, good afternoon. So it's Gary Rowland. I'm the owner of Beams Laser Engraving and also Does It All Handyman Services. So I actually do full service, signage, apparel, anything decorated and physical branding.
Matt, you're up.
Matt Hewson, I am a coach, strategist, and wannabe mentor of small business owners. So I want to make sure that people save their hard-earned cash, right? It's obviously a brave new world, and we're all a little bit lean probably in the wallet. So let's make sure that we can strategize and save you some money in your business.
Mm-hmm. Ovi, are you with us today?
Yeah, I am here.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I'm Ovi, recent law school graduate, and I mainly joined us to listen and learn. So I'm not sure if I can contribute much, but I'll be in the background here.
Well, then you're going to be the perfect litmus test to make sure there isn't too much bullshit being said while we're on here, right?
I guess
it's going to be the perfect one to do it. So I love it because I had you guys intro and I'm going, okay, I want to let you guys set the agenda for the topics we're going to talk about today. And I heard 2 really important ones to start with, actually 3 total. And so I'm going to lay them out there and make sure that everybody else is good with this. I heard HR, people, capital, right? And yes, Ashley started that off. I heard about time management coming out of Paul here this week because it is a constant reminder for us. And Justin, of course, because I know his business intimately and very, very well, talked about finance. He didn't talk too much about it. So those are going to be our 3 catch-alls for this week. But I'm going to pick a narrative underneath that. So with people rate thou, the one we're going to pick, and if you don't have experience with it, that's okay, because maybe you got experience on the other side of the table too. We're going to talk about hiring. Companies either finding, keeping, or in some cases getting rid of the wrong people. So find and keep good people's tough. So we're going to stick to people inside the business. Can they make or break business? That's going to be one of the themes. Second one's going to be time. Who here's lost track of their time in the past week? I want an instance or an example and an idea how to fix that. And the third one's still going to be about money. And I heard something from another client this morning where they're having, and this touches on HR. And it also is a time sink as well, because they're running into people that are quote unquote going through the motions applying. And they had somebody just this week that they interviewed said, actually, I'm here because I just want to keep this, I just want to keep everything moving right now. I'm happy sitting at home. Them and their spouse sitting at home because they didn't file till much later, collecting their, and in Canada, they're $2,000 a month for the CRB. So their household income is $4,000 a month clear while they're sitting at home in their underwear watching television. That's a tough environment to try and hire somebody else if you're not going to pay at least that amount. And if you get to sit at home with the person that you love most, and you make $4,000 sitting on the couch, setting aside the implications morally, ethically, or from a work standpoint for a moment, that's a tough thing to argue with. It's a really tough thing. It's like, nah, we're going to sit at home in our gym shorts, drink wine, watch Netflix. Well, I'm talking to you guys and I love what I do, but I wouldn't mind sitting in my gym shorts watching Netflix. It's a bad way to pass the time. So those are our 3 really good people. Finding them, holding on to them. Who lost track of time in a really important way this week and had to kind of drag themselves back. Let's find some examples and some lessons. And that third one has to do with money, because money ties into both of those, but money's a tough thing for some people to come by right now. So we're going to talk about finance, money, and really keeping good track of it for business. So people capital, the people that we got inside of our business, and making sure we got really good people to work with here right now. The floor is open. And remember, bad words are okay, because I click a little box that says this isn't for children on YouTube. So it's okay. It's perfectly fine. I say fuck occasionally when we're on here too. There we go. Got out of the way. YouTube hasn't shut me down yet, so we're probably good to go. But otherwise, bad words are okay. If we argue too long or we go too long, I'll shut the conversation down, but I'd like people's opinions, and it's okay if it doesn't match what somebody else says. So we're there. People, find them, hold on to them, make sure they're really, really good. What's so tough about that? What's the tough part about doing that? Getting started, knowing who they are, knowing what they are. What if you are, and so here's our second bad word of the day, YouTube. What if we're terrible pieces of shit? How are we going to possibly get good people to come to work with us? There we go. There's the table that's set. What do we got? Who's got what to start with?
I guess it seems fitting for me to jump in first. Okay, so there's a lot to unpack there, so I'll try and stay somewhat focused, so you can call me out if I'm bouncing everywhere. But I think recruiting and hiring and keeping is a skill to be had and a skill to be learned. It just doesn't fall out of the sky into our brains. So that's the first thing. And I think the second thing is you need some self-awareness as a hiring manager to say, how are you coming across? How are you representing your business, right? I talked to somebody this morning who called me with urgency saying that they lost a long-term employee who gave 1 day's notice and sent resignation by email. And she's heartbroken, right? And so we talked through that. But what I had to tell her was, you may know somebody for years, you may do all of your due diligence in the interview, you may do assessments on them to determine their behavior or cognitive abilities, and you still don't know how they may react to a specific situation, or if somebody decides to hand them a huge extra chunk of money, right? Anything can motivate somebody to make that quick decision, which may not have been in their realm of decision making prior. But when you're recruiting for people, there are some best practices. And I think that it's important to either determine what those are and find gaps in your current process. And if you don't think there's gaps, then what are the expectations you're setting, right? I think another client this week, we talked about the way that they communicate in an interview. They said, oh, I'm really flexible. Do you want to work evenings? Do you want to work weekends? Do you want to work during the day? And I said, well, that may convey that you're not setting the boundaries, right? And you're conveying that you're flexible and you're conveying that you're laissez-faire. And so maybe that's not a surprise that 3 months in, the employees are now being laissez-faire and really not caring and not giving a lot of notice. So I think there's a lot to unpack there, and I'll stop there and chime in later.
We got the technical answer to start with. Who else has got what? You just apologize for making us smarter? Come on.
See, and I'll jump in because I think that Ashley should play cleanup after this, because some of us are a little bit more punchy, right? So I've come from a food and beverage background. So the hiring, dehiring process there, obviously in a transient industry, was challenging. We knew, as we hired people, that the cost associated with the training, orientation, and other could be a complete wash. They may find something in the first 100 days, and all of a sudden we've made them just that much better and put something, an additional line on their resume. But I always would look at it as going, if we find and hire great people, even if it's 400-600 days or 5 years, 10 years, doesn't really matter. Let's capture that energy while we can, knowing that we may be that stepping stone. And again, that was in an industry that is known for the up and comers, the students, the this, that, and the other. But I also found if you treat them right, they'll carry their degree on their serving tray and be proud of it, because they're paying for their schooling and for their education with this, job or career, and many stay. And that's something to me, is I build the culture first, and the good people that align with that vision will stay always.
All right. Other opinions and thoughts? If you came on here and you think you're going to get to sit there mute and not participate, I got the door bouncers right now, Paul and Matt with itchy trigger fingers, and Paul just went off camera. That guy's a jerk. But they'll boot you. So who else got what? It's people, right? So what did it take to keep you someplace? What did it take to keep somebody? Because I'll add this, Ashley, yeah, she can come in and mop up duty in a moment. Having had my background with HR as well. Something that we always talked about quite a bit with employers is, well, what if they leave for more money? Well, then you've already failed. Because money is one of the biggest disincentives. It doesn't mean people don't want more money. Of course they do. Life continues to get more expensive. Bills continue, we're in a weirdly blessed situation right now because the cost of credit is so low that mortgage payments are lower and line of credit payments are lower and car payments are lower, all these other things. But that's not going to last forever, right? So people continuously, day in, day out, week in, week out, need more money. So of course people are going to look for pay raises and other incentives and make sure that what's being paid in the market, what their value is, whether perceived or actual, is good. But money is also disincentive, meaning that after a while, the amount of money you paid them, even when you give them more, it's just like it's still mine. So we got to find other ways to keep them, right? Ashley?
The other thing I'll say to that, Mitch, is I've seen countless employers, and I mean, there's no bad strategy, but I've seen countless employers receive resignation from an employee. And it maybe the reason is, oh, I got an offer I can't refuse, I need more money. And the employer will go, okay, well, we'll give you a raise, or here's your counter offer to stay with us. And the thing I want to caution people with that is, they were likely leaving for more than just the money, and you could probably guarantee that they will leave eventually, and probably in shorter order than you expect. So that money is more like a Band-Aid, and if you're doing it, great, but I would start contingency planning the day that you give them that raise, because anything can happen short term.
Actually, if I can on that, I'm looking to, Ovi, jump in here. You don't have to type, just stick your hand up and start talking.
So my advice would only pertain to startups because that's where I had the experience. So I'm not sure, established businesses, but I wrote them down so I have some order here. But when you hire people for a startup, what I found out to be useful in the way you should think about it is in sort of a 5-area breakdown. The first one is the value you're getting in for the money you're paying out. So you want to make sure that that applies. The number 2 is the timing. Is this the right time to hire that type of value? Do you need that skill set yet? 3, sharing the vision and passion must be something that happens in the person you hire. Otherwise, you're going to have a hard time pushing them to do the proper work for the company. Number 4, you want to make sure they match the skill set. And that applies to every job generally, but also in the startup. And then the work ethics. You want to make sure they're easy to communicate with, and then they work well with everybody else on the team.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing. Jay, go ahead.
Hey, so I don't know. I was just thinking while you guys were talking about, so just to refrain, we're talking about hiring practices and methods of retaining employees and so on, right? I mean, I kind of approach this from a multi-level mentoring perspective, or an MLM perspective, if you will, where I want to make sure that my lead hand is, I'm mentoring them properly in their leadership skills. I'm investing in them as a person. I'm growing their skill sets. I'm getting them to practice those skill sets. And then they do that same thing to their apprentices, right? So, I mean, we're a smaller electrical company in terms of labor, but I feel like providing that investment in their mentorship and growing their leadership skills as it is, they start to see the value of sticking around with this company because they can see themselves growing as well. And I feel like the relationship I have with my lead hand anyway is such that she'll invest as much time as she needs to, irrelevant of, we were talking about the Band-Aid of payment increase or decrease. But I feel like that's a method of retention that I would continue growing as we hire more and more staff, right? As capable given the time constraints.
I'm going to throw something in real quick. I'm going to nudge the conversation because we're going to switch here in just a couple of minutes to our next topic as well. I had a client this week that was reinforced with a brand new hire they have coming in, that 3 weeks ago when they made their successful offer to somebody else who's still retained position, another part of the country, et cetera. This person was going to come on board. And to Ashley's point, and I mean what Ovi's talking about right now, and to Jason as well, how much work was put into to this kind of person, because the moment their employer found out that they were going to leave, suddenly there was a massive increase. Hey, we're going to roll you up quite a bit. Well, his first thought was, and this is feedback coming back, and he's still coming over to our new place, is like, where the hell was this money before? Right? It's about the whole that's going to be created, not about the value of the human being that's coming in. That's a really telling thing, right? And it's not that it's not flattering, but the very first reaction this person had and the kind of industry they're in, this business is very meticulous, right? It's very specific work. It's very exact work. And so the first impression and opinion wasn't like, hey, maybe they do love me. It was like, well, you know, it meant so little to you before that only when the threat of me leaving was going to happen. Now you found more money. Well, if I'm unhappy now, all you really want me to do is do the same job for slightly more money. Not interested. I'm out the door. Ash, if you want to give us one example really quick, and then I'm going to ask for people, show of hands style, really quick comments, and then we're going to close out this topic and go to the next one. Ash, what you got?
Yeah, it more reinforces the example of you just said, but with an actual example. So somebody in my network was really debating leaving an organization, taking a pay cut to go to another organization, and through that decision, they decided to leave. In their performance review in their current job 3-4 months earlier, you know, there was 3 things asked: more vacation, change of title, or increase in pay. Wasn't asking for all 3, but said, look, I'm open. I just want a little bit more, right? They said no to all 3. The minute she gave her resignation, it was, oh, we'll give you a significant increase. We'll change your title. And do you want more vacation? And to your point, Mitch, it was, so 3 months ago, I couldn't have any of that. And now all of a sudden I'm looking to leave and you're willing to just, you know, so it does happen. And as I said, it's not the greatest practice because now you're looking, your brand recognition with that brand may be tainted, right? So
yeah. I'm gonna finish up by saying this, and then the question I've got for everybody here going forward, and then we're gonna switch over, of course, to time in a moment. That both a sexy and unsexy beast as well, to follow right up on the hiring practices. But when we sit there and look at this, the number of new business owners that I've met that left the place they were and started up in the industry they're in, which is identical to the job they left, because a boss pissed them off and wouldn't pay them enough and only wanted to do it after, was more like fuel to the fire. It was tackling fuel, right? It was what it took for them to get off their ass and go off and do it, because every time you have a chance to have a relationship with these people, the value only comes down to the money, and all you're worried about is the hole that's going to be created. So at least step in and own it. Otherwise, if you don't want to treat your people, you don't find them valuable, then why the hell are you keeping them around? I've met too many business owners that got started in their business simply because they left someplace else that they were pissed off at. Noted, if you're out there and you're running a company and you can't seem to hold on to people, you are literally breeding your competitors. I can't say it any more plainly. You're breeding the people that know you most intimately and how to hurt you or take your stuff away. Not everybody's stuff away, not somebody else's, yours. If Jason runs an electrical company, or Ashley runs an HR company, or Paul that's been backed up into real estate in the past, trains somebody, pisses them off and they leave, they're coming for your stuff. They're not coming for the stuff. They're coming for yours. That's what they know. They know the clients, they know the space, they know the tools, they know the relationships, they know the vendors, they know all of it. They're coming for you, and all the ironclad agreements in the world aren't going to stop them from taking knives to you. So with that, who has ever hired somebody or been hired for a job? Show of hands. Who's ever hired somebody or been hired for a job? Gary, you've never hired a human being or never got a job? Okay, there we go. Good. Just checking with you. Who here has ever hired somebody? Gone through the process to help and hire somebody, right? Okay. Who's ever hired somebody and then immediately regretted it? Who's ever hired somebody and thought it was the best thing you ever did? Okay. When you hire somebody that's the best thing that ever did, I want you to give me a handful of words, a sentence or two. What stood out to you overall? How long did it take to figure it out that it was probably one of the best things you ever did? I want you to say it out loud because I want that to be wisdom to pass on to somebody else. So who's got what? Really quick. So we're gonna change tack here.
It took me a year after I got somebody on the tools and I was able to step off. It took me a good year to say this has been good for the business and I can actually focus on growing the company because I'm not on tools every day.
Okay. Who else? Who else got an example?
I'd say for me, it took about 2 weeks to say, like, I I had a person identified, hired them, was really happy things worked out. And then really to see that return and say, yeah, 100% no regrets, probably about 2 weeks. It was pretty quick. Yeah.
Who else?
Two, the last restaurant that I worked actively in, the managers that I knew were going to be great leaders are now the leaders in their space. And they're still there a decade later. So to me, it was like very quickly identified, and I'm so happy long term that relationship continued there.
Justin, Gary, Paul, Obi, go ahead.
I give an example of the opposite person. Yeah. So interview process was about an hour. I asked a lot of questions about where they are in their life, figured out that they're not very passionate / ready for this type of work. They were sort of soul searching for what they want to do. Advised my boss, which was the owner of the company, not to hire this person. They hired him. Within 3 days, they fired him.
Okay. I'll finish off, and then we're going to be switching over to time in a moment. So as we're setting the table for that one, I want you to think about the last time your clock or your calendar failed you and the last time you were on top of it. Chances are it was in the past 7 days, but I want you to think about that for a moment, because I want us to take a couple of these examples, stretch them out a little bit, put them back together. But my final thought here is the best of us can screw up, right? The absolute best of us can screw up. I hired somebody very close to me to come into my business, and I spent 6 weeks tied up in knots. I knew the day after, but I didn't want to admit it, that it was a bad move. And it took me 6 weeks. And it took a whole bunch of people, my mentor and coach, my wife, and another business owner that I trusted quite a bit, to say, what the hell are you doing? This is killing you. It cost me a relationship. It cost me somebody that's been in my life for a very, very long time. So for us, we got to watch out what we're doing as well, too. So if I could pass on one final piece of wisdom, don't make this decision by emotion. Make this decision because it makes sense. Now, there's emotion that goes into it, because Obi laid it out really nicely as well for us, too. You have to be passionate about something. You have to like something. You have to be intrigued with the idea or the thought of where you're coming to work. You have to have something in the form of a technical ability that can be applied to what you're going to be doing. And of course, you got to have some skills that you develop throughout life. You know, the fancy word is competency. But you have to have some competencies as well that apply to what you're doing in the job. If all that stuff doesn't come together, you can't hire. You can't. You shouldn't. It's going to hurt you. It's going to hurt the business. It's going to hurt this person. And a former partner of mine and a mentor said that when you keep people around that are unhappy, or when you keep people around you're unhappy with, you keep people around that are causing friction or problems, the first person that you're causing a problem for is that employee. Never mind for your own business, the other employees around it. If somebody's miserable, they hate it, they don't like the job, they don't know what else to do, it's a tough thing to do, to have to terminate somebody, fire them, get rid of them. But you're doing that person a favor first. They might not thank you for it at the very beginning. You're doing something safer for the business. You're doing something to remove an environment that reduces friction, maybe even caustic behavior from other employees. And you're doing that person a favor, as tough as it is to believe. Like hiring, yeah, right there. Jay, you got a right one. Culture fit, really important, really, really important. Or like after 6 weeks, having to fire somebody really close to you. Costing that relationship, right? All right, so we're going to shift over to time. I want you to think a good example of where you've been killing it, and a good example of where you fell flat on your face. Chances are, if you're in business, both those have occurred in the last 7 days. None of us are bulletproof. We've all got something as an example. Some people haven't talked yet. Justin, Gary. So get ready, right? We're going to need to get some feedback from you guys. I said, if you're here in the studio audience, you are participating. This is a round table, right?
I'm going to start off just by giving an app that I use that really helps with this. It's called a time logger, as in the letter A and time logger. And sort of whenever I have to do important things, I hit the category I created and he helps me track the time. And then I look down my phone and he kind of pops on the center of the screen, says you spend an hour on this. I'm like, okay, that's too much. I got to move on.
There you go. There you go. Okay. Who else got something?
I mean, we've had a great win, and we were talking about my lead hand earlier. She's incredible. She's taking things, running with it, taking a ton off my back. and the initiative is just through the roof. So the training mentorship is really paying off in that sense. And a fall on my face was last year I thought I could afford a full-time sales position, and found out a couple of months later I couldn't. That was not a thing I could afford, and I spent quite a bit of salary payments in keeping that person employed for a few months when I couldn't afford it to begin with. And so that was a great learning lesson. I thought I was ready, but I wasn't. So.
I think for me in this virtual world, it's very easy to not code in what you would call travel time, right? Because in the pre-COVID world, you drive between meetings, have time to break, bathroom break, whatever you needed. And now for busy weeks, it's back to back to back to back to back, right? And while that's never the goal, it happens. So I actually learned in Outlook, you can now go into settings and actually change the time of your meetings to either start a little bit after the hour or end a little bit early to give you some breathing room as a habit. So that was a pretty cool, helpful tool if you're not always on top of giving yourself some free time.
We've recently switched over from Calendly auto bookings to our Microsoft Teams, and we've built in buffers in between meetings so we can take a 5-minute break or a 10-minute break, because I was finding that you would start your day at 8 o'clock in the morning, 7 o'clock in the morning, and all of a sudden it's 3:30 and you still haven't eaten or, had a drink of water, because it was back to back to back.
Who else we got? Gary, got anything?
Yeah, actually, one of the interesting things for me this week, because of timing, is that I had my week booked. But we got rush orders coming in for Father's Day. Not something we normally see, but it's definitely seasonal. And that's growing. So Christmas was the same. Valentine's Day, not so much. But now that personal items being requested. And that's causing us interesting times.
Would you like to hear anything about timelines in startups? Some advice that I've learned from my own lesson? Is that relevant to this?
Oh, we go ahead and pitch.
Was that to me?
I was just going to say that one thing that I've sort of learned from my experience with startups in timelines is that oftentimes you may get stuck on wanting things to be lined up the right way in order for you to proceed forward with something you set up in the timeline. And that's usually a mistake, and it's going to hold you back. So you should just do immediately the things that you can do and let that idea of things fitting perfectly go, because they'll eventually start fitting in the right spots as you proceed and do things. Because doing it over time will eventually make it work.
Gary, in our language space, things that we talked about in the past too, has more to do with the fact that, and what I always talking about is more like project management than anything else. And that's where we eliminate the idea of lists, right? So many of us have lists. How many people have got something like this or a digital one sitting next to them? Matt's got the iPen and the iPad sitting right next to him. Jay's got his book. Everybody that's on this call that's a current or forward client, show me where your notebook is, right? Ashley's digging hers out right now. Right, there we go. Everybody's got their stuff. Ovi, you're like one of the left out children here. We're gonna have to get you in with one of my coaches here right away.
I got my list here, but
badass, love it, absolutely love it. But everybody's got their thing here, right? But how many of us, we flip it open, are going to start going through pages, even though you're quote unquote not supposed to, and you start finding lists? I'll tell you what. Where? Oh, the rest of it's over there. All of this is the last 8 months of my business. There isn't a single list in here. There isn't anything that has a 1 to 10 in there and says, Mitch, you got to do this shit. Every one of these things in here is categorization notes just to keep details straight as I'm hearing it. And then it gets put someplace else, right? There's nothing in it that says, okay, start at 1 and finish at 10. And that's part of what we talk about for time. So one of our finishing thoughts on this one about time as well, I'll lay this one out for everybody for a moment, is and to Ashley's point too, thanks to this and thanks to this glowing box that we're all staring at right now, it's made it so much easier to do so much more. I marvel at it, and I've been challenged to have conversations with other coaches in the past In fact, I've got another coach as a client. Well, we had a conversation early in our relationship when we first started working together. And she goes, Mitch, how busy are you? And I started going back and I found a week where I had 74 meetings. I thought that was a lot. 3 weeks ago, I had 89. To manage that, you have to know where and what and how it's going to fit. You got to know what projects you got to work on. That still has to include things like emails and pee breaks and water and all these other good things, right? How do I know that I'm getting enough water? Well, my food logging app and this thing here. How do I know I'm getting enough of this in other than my throat hurts at the end of the day when I'm not drinking enough water as well? Matt, I love the fact you got restaurant pictures on your desk. Love it. Absolutely love it, right? How do I know? One, this thing right to the top is 26 ounces. And every 2 hours on my calendar, because it's the rule that I got, I have to have a break. And every 2 hours, this has to get filled back up. It's got to go right down over here. I'm allowed to put tea or coffee in this one, but I can't have more than one coffee a day now. Otherwise, I can switch to tea. And every 2 hours, this thing has to be full. If I don't, I notice it in a hurry. And guess what? You drink 26 ounces of water every 2 hours minimum. Guess what? Every 2 hours, you have to go to the bathroom. So it's a pretty good break as well. Secondly, to Ashley's point too, and once again, to Ovi and for everybody else here, I love the fact that calendar apps have, do you want to use an accelerated meeting? Google just says what it is. Do you want an accelerated meeting? How big is that gap? I have 5-minute, 10-minute acceleration. 30 and 60-minute meetings are 25 and 50 minutes in length. I have lots and lots of clients that are like, hey, we're coming up at 50 minutes. We can take another 2, finish your thought, right? Now it's a gift. It's something we can put away, but it also means there's a time to stop, get up, do what? Go pee, get a refill on water. And like a lot of other people with the glowing box here, depending on age where you're at, you may have family, kids, other things that are around too. Like I can hear my daughter somewhere upstairs right now, and it's just her and I at home today. It's quiet, safe, it's secure. But I heard her rooting around for art supplies earlier. So when I went up really quick on what? My water break at the 2-hour mark after a client 2 hours this morning, what did I find? Art supplies all over the floor. I knew she got into it already, but I needed to do this and do a little cleanup real quick and say, Daddy loves you, but clean this up or we're going to sell you. So we'll see if she's cleaned up the art supplies after. But for us, time is the largest depreciating asset we've got. You can't beg for it, borrow it, leverage it. You can't do anything. You can only be smart with what you got. 86,400 seconds in a day. So learning to manage and mitigate that, learning to give yourself those time and those breaks, and learning when to say no is critically important for what you're going to do. So there's the pontificating and the coaching for the rest of today. Now we're going to switch to money. Weird. We talked about hiring people. We talked about time, and now we talked about money. Does it sound like all three connect? We're going to talk about money and finance more importantly, because right now, who here thinks the economy's doing well? Show of hands. Who here thinks the economy's doing well? Some wavering hands? Okay. What tells you the economy is doing well? I want you to think about that for a moment. I knew you would try. It was going to be a race between Paul or Ashley turning on their mic first. Had to be. Absolutely had to be. Jason's in on it now, right? But I want you to think about it, and I want you to give me an example. Because what I'm looking for, and that's a good one, Ash. Yeah, very good one. What I'm looking for is whether you think it because you're feeling it or think it because you can touch it. Paul, what you got?
Well, this issue is ending. We all know what it is. Things are opening up. There's a lot of pent up energy. I think people are ready and willing, and it's overdue. We're seeing it in some industries, and now it's just going to spread to other industries. For me, I look at, what's the political environment? What are other countries doing? And it usually leads back to Canada. Look at the commodities right now, right? For us, especially oil at 70, it's expected to go up to 80. Who knows how long it stays there? But, that bodes well for us in this area. You take a look at agriculture. That's on the rise. You take a look at industries starting to move, engineering firms that are overly busy. And then, with Ashley saying hiring, the dire thing is the guys who are sitting on the sidelines collecting their $2,000 check. When everything opens up, what do you think is going to happen? The competition is going to be fierce for hiring, and the pendulum is going to switch the other way. for all of us who may be hiring on that side. Now we get to pick through a lot larger, option on that side. So I think you're kind of shooting themselves in the foot right at the moment. Yeah, that's where I'm at. I think it's going to be go time.
I see that as well, Paul. I mean, we've seen, you're talking about commodities. We're playing the commodity market with copper. Every single one of my suppliers has gone up 350%, and we're expected another 200% in the next few months. I mean, we're talking about 5 times the cost of what copper wire used to be, and they're not projecting a decrease till next spring. And yet, when I go out and quote a system, or I quote some work or whatever the case, and it's like 3 or 4 times the cost of a regular quote, we're getting people saying, heck yeah, where do I sign? Right? They want to get this stuff done. They want to get this working. Nobody's been on vacation. Everybody has money to burn. It's burning a hole in their pockets. And they're happy to get renovations done. They're happy to get this work done. And there's less concern about having contractors in their homes. There's less concern about having these folks coming in and out of their houses. So I very much see that as an upturn. Hesitant, but cautious optimism, if you will, is how I'm looking at this.
Yeah, Jason, I totally agree on that front. I see lots of contractors, lots of more work trucks in the neighborhoods, right? Lots more visitors at people's houses for business reasons, based on logoed trucks or whatever. I also, in my market, see that so many companies are hiring. I spoke with a recruitment agency the other day, and they have 140 active positions that they're recruiting for. And that to me and it's a rolling number, right? That's not stagnant. That it was 101 one week and then 140 the next. And when I talk to my clients or potential clients, they're like, yeah, we're still feeling the crunch of finances, but we need to prepare and be proactive because we know this is coming, right? So then the conversation is, do you put the cart before the horse and hire and spend the money? Or do you nickel and dime and kind of claw back and then hire somebody too late that then you're going to get in a bad tornado? So that's maybe next week's conversation, but yeah, definitely seeing that things are slowly coming back to normal, notwithstanding there are, of course, some companies still struggling, and I empathize with them for sure.
Justin, I'm going to talk to the dudes on the other side of finance. Come on. Between you and Gary, you guys are like sphinxes over there, right? You're waiting to be asked the sacred question or have the right answer and strike the rest of us dead. So what you got for us?
I still see people holding on to their money. A lot of creditors, a lot of people that are owed money, they don't want to send an account out for, say, litigation or collection on a hope that, if they don't have to lose 20 or 30% commission, that things may turn around for that company, or, soon enough we'll be out of this. The reality is in that case, a lot of these guys are going to fall flat. They're not going to get paid. And that's just going to be the dynamic of it. I think that, for the immediate here and now, we've got the rah, and things are going to be opening up. We're going to start seeing money flowing, but we still have to address the last, 16, 17, 18 months of things not flowing as well as it could have or should have done. And then on the flip side, I'm looking at consumers. We're having conversations with trustees. We're having conversations with higher up, with other financial industries. And it's the calm before the storm. The free money is going to run out. The $2,000 or the $1,800 a month is going to run out. And when that money runs out, Ashley's going to be busy because there's going to be people looking to hire, which is going to be a good thing. However, at that point, the consumers are going to have to start dealing with things. Why? Because they don't have that CRB coming in anymore. I went $1,800 a month. Now I'm getting $3,200 a month, but I don't have the ability to defer payments anymore. I don't have the ability to do this. I don't have the ability to do that. And so I think that we're just kind of sitting on the calm before the storm on that side of the fence. I've started getting a lot more inquiries about small claim civil litigation. I've got a company from Ontario that reached out. They want to start, the banks have started to give them permission to sue again. In Alberta, the banks had said, hold off on suing. Now the banks are saying, no, you know what, go ahead. So they reached out and said, how much is it going to cost us to sue a minimum of 15 people in Alberta every month, up to a maximum of 50? Just put that into your cap for a second. 50 lawsuits a month from one agency, and we've got 100 registered agencies in the province. So on the flip side, I'm seeing it from things are going to get ugly for a lot of people in a very short amount of time on that side. So I like to talk money, but I also don't like the grim reality of some of the darker stuff that I'm seeing. I'm seeing businesses that have held on. They're continuing to hold on because of the emergency relief fund, and they're continuing to hang on. And then as soon as that stuff's done, a lot of them plan on, walking away too. So.
Well, and to your point, Justin, on the flip side of the employee or the person that Mitch said at the very beginning of this call, that's sitting at home perfectly comfortable collecting CERB, right? There's a lot of it won't happen to me mentality that they're taking that $2,000 a month and spending it all. Not to mention they're going to get a tax bill from the CRA, maybe 7 years from now. It might not be soon. It might be in 7 years saying, hey, you owe us tax on all that money. Yep. And then I've also heard of people kind of being a little bit more naive and saying, oh, I'm working a full-time job, but I'm still collecting CERB because they're not asking for proof. I'm like, oh, well, that will come to bite you too, because you're going to owe all that money back. So for anybody listening that isn't a business owner, right, that's one of the risks and challenges we're gonna face. But that question may come back to business owners of, hey, I just got a big bill from the tax. Can I have an advance on my money? Can I have a raise? I need some more money to pay off this big debt, right? So that may come. We've seen everything as employers. So those questions may come too.
I think we're going to see a sudden spike in bankruptcies as well. I mean, a lot of people have deferred things. A lot of people, during COVID, I was dealing with one creditor in particular. The collection agency that they hired shut down for 6 months during COVID. And we were trying to resolve some accounts for a client. The collection agency had shut down, physically laid everybody off and shut down. The creditor wouldn't deal with us because the account was assigned to an agency. So for 6 months, this account sat there in limbo, and it wound up reaching the statute of limitations for credit bureau reporting within Alberta. So the creditor, because they were stubborn, they didn't get paid. But to your point, a lot of people are going to start looking at the bankruptcies, looking at filing consumer proposals. There was, I believe somebody was lobbying the government to change the bankruptcy, how long a bankruptcy would report on your bureau or a consumer proposal would report on your bureau. And on one of the on one of the apps that we have, we match you with trustees. We tell you what a bankruptcy will cost, what a consumer proposal will cost. We actually walk you through the processes so you understand. At the same time, people coming out of this, I think once COVID hit, people had to start making a lot of changes financially. They had to start looking at going to different providers. They had to start, budgeting for groceries. They had to start doing all of these things. And as long as they maintain that coming out of COVID, even if they do have to get put into a proposal of some sort or some sort of an insolvency coming out of it, if they maintain those same spending patterns that they had, that they were forced to have, when they come out of a proposal, when they come out of a bankruptcy, I think that, their lives will be a hell of a lot better than they were, kind of leading up to it. But yeah, to your point, Ashley, I think that you are going to see a lot of people coming in saying, well, I need, $40 an hour. I need, 25, a 25% raise in order to survive. And if not, I'm going to go to this company that will. So I know and from the hiring point of view, we've had a hell of a time bringing the right candidates in. Mitch can attest to this. I mean, and some of them, it's been, well, we want $100,000 a year to start. I put it in the chat. We, about 3 months ago, had a guy, perfect candidate for the job, called him, said, yeah, the only reason I applied is so I could prove to the government that I applied so I could continue to get my EI. Thanks, but, I'm just going to ride this out. So when I see that sort of stuff, I'm saying, well, the economy isn't as good as, we could say it is, but I'm also not in, Jason's field or Ashley's field or, Mitch's field for that matter. So
I'm going to show you something that's really ham-fisted drawn for a moment. Okay. Just a bunch of boxes with a bunch of arrows connecting them together. Okay. I want you to take these fancy boxes with these fancy arrows, connect them together over a moment. And I want you to imagine the street that you're on well, maybe not Gary Street. His houses are much further apart and they're much larger, right? But I want you to imagine that these are the houses on your street for a moment. You walk out the front door and you can see the house across the street, and you can see the houses down the road. You can see the houses across the street, wherever it is. And every time you walk across the street, right, you can walk across a visit, come back over, etc. Now imagine every one of these houses is a business. And every one of these arrows where stuff's moving around is where business is going back and forth. So the houses right here are trading business back and forth. And this house over here only comes one way. And the next one over is going to the house next door, and the house 2 doors down and across the street. And the next house over is just going back and forth. And that next one, then it does go back and forth, but then it goes to the last house in the street, and then the last 2 houses in the street are just trading back and forth. This is business. This is what all our businesses are doing. Imagine what happens when you shut the first 2 off, right? Well, those 2 were really just hurt working with each other. But this house here, the only place it really goes to is one of these others. So now that's kind of out of the way, right? And after a while, it sucks up that business too. And so we really don't think of it. We're going, hey, here we go. It's okay. It's fine. It's good. It's no problem. But then something happens because there's not enough money just inside the system itself. And then one day these guys get tired and they sell the business off. And that goes. And then after a while, because you see this arrow that goes here to the only business next door, that one disappears. And then because this one's the only one the arrow goes to, that one disappears. How many houses do we have left on a 10-house street? 4. They're doing fine. But this one's never had anything coming into it. After a while, if it doesn't have anything coming into it, it starts to run out of steam. This one only has people coming to them for stuff. This one has stuff coming in and it has a 2-way street going on. This is kind of what's happened over the last year, the last 14, 15 months. We talk about money. We talk about the good and the bad side. The reason we see so much happening. But this is where a commodity price comes in. This is where the cost of labor fluctuates wildly. This is where our ability, and I mean, one of the reminders for me from the house analogy for a moment, and I've been talking the house analogy for just about a year, saying, walk out the front door of your house and imagine only doing business on your street. Pick 10 houses, 5 on your side, 5 on theirs. Or you're in an apartment building, walk out your door and go 3 doors one way, 3 doors the other, and then line up the other 12 doors across from you. Close 2 of those doors off to business. Close off a third, close off a fourth. What happens? The whole economy starts shrinking. The velocity, the way money moves around, the options and opportunities people have. There's less money moving around amongst all the houses. Pretty soon we got, and just did a really shitty example, we went from 10 houses to 4. That's actually, we experienced an awful lot. When we talk about bankruptcy, insolvency potentially spiking, we got a whole bunch of people with a limited amount of money either sitting in their house or only making the 1 or 2 trades that they need right now. Everything else is slowed down. So what happens when things slow down? Have you checked the price of gas in the last 24 hours? Jason can tell you that the price of copper wire as an electrician has gone up 500%. HVAC and plumbing companies, I had an HVAC client I talked to last week. He goes, this material cost is 40% higher than before. And I said, why are you worried about quoting that to your client? What are my competitors going to quote them? I said, they get their supplies from the same place. He's like, that's a really good point. But how much further can we go forward like that, right? We talked about the gluts and the changes and stuff like that. To Justin's point as well, people are coming in making demands. Well, I'm going to go back to the HR question for a second. When was the last time they made 100K a year? Where was the last place they made 100K a year? What was the environment they were in for 100K a year? Because the other point he made is you got to get your budgeting in line too, because the new reality is right now, there's actually a lot less money. There's a whole bunch of business happening, but you know what's really happening with my shitty little house analogy? Lots of people are still trading across the street and still going to the 2 houses they go to right now, but there's actually very little money trading hands. We're borrowing it. We're leveraging it. We're lending it against our house. We're using found government money. Where did that money come from? Where is it going to come from? Right? So all these different things are going to compound. Does it mean everything's going to sideways and collapse? No. Does it mean everything's as good as it looks like right now and going to get better? No. It's going to be up to a whole bunch of us to figure that out ourselves. So we had a number of topics today, and we got some input from everybody on here today. We talked about people, we talked about time, we talked about money, and really what you should do and where you kind of got stuck. But don't you think for a moment, as every topic was talked through and whoever shared, you could see those instances amongst all of it. And that is a perfect analogy for what we've got economically right now. What we just got going out in the world when it comes to people and money and time, whether it's hiring or keeping your business or run, whatever. These things are a lot more complicated than we think, than we can imagine, yet we can illustrate them very simplistically. If I can hire and I only have this amount of money, it used to be this amount of money, and the person asking is asking for the amount of money this was before, how long until our business starts to stall or stutter because we can't hire? And these people keep wandering the countryside going, I'm really, really frustrated. Well, how much time, resources, money, etc. in your business are wasted talking to people continuously because, I hate to say it, they're just not, I don't know, they haven't caught up yet. If we don't make an instance or a difference, or we don't look at these things a little differently, are willing to innovate, change what we're thinking about, etc., we're going to continue to screw ourselves. We're going to continue to stab ourselves in the back. Never mind making a bad hire, being terrible with our calendars, or, maybe not being as good with our money as we could be. So we got 2 minutes left. If you've got one piece of advice, you've got 15 seconds, and everybody's going to talk here. One piece of advice to take somebody much stronger into the weekend than they did before. I need you to lay that down right now, and then we're going to take off for the rest of the day. So I'm going to start, and I'm going to work backwards off of my screen. Jason, one piece of advice, you got 15 seconds or less, that's going to make somebody else, their business, their life. It could be about the topics we got today or something else. I don't care what it is. Let's lay that out for them and move forward. Let's give somebody something to work with.
Don't be afraid to make the ask. Put it out there, cover your costs, mark your margins up. Everybody else is fighting the same game. Don't be afraid to ask. You'll have higher quality customers, maybe lower quantity, but higher quality.
Done. Ovi, what you got?
Watch Mitch's virtual business box.
Love it. And I love you. I love you very much. Matt, what you got?
I would say what I think said for the last 16 months, make a move. So again, don't be afraid. Like the statement that I've said week in and week out is plenty of flat squirrels in the middle of the road because they were scared to make a move. Just take a direction, and you will find out if it's the right direction faster by moving in that direction.
Gary? Sage wisdom.
So if you leave a company due to bad treatment and you start up your own firm, do you treat your employees the same as you were treated, or do you learn the lesson and actually treat them better?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Ash just got the heart broken out for you. Justin?
Execution. Execute. Set a plan. Execute on it. You may have to pivot once or twice in that plan, but don't take your foot off the gas. Don't let up, and keep trucking forward so you're able to execute on what you've set out to do.
Paul?
Time blocking and making sure your schedule has enough space for when the shit happens or when the calls keep coming in. And it's usually Murphy's Law. It's not one, it's like 5 of them on your busiest day. So if you can have your busiest day, but have your no-go time so that you can fit that in, it definitely helps lowering the stress level.
Ash?
Yeah, I would say proactivity. I mean, sometimes it can be daunting to stop what you're doing, get out of the day-to-day and think forward. But I think it will pay off not only on your budget and your time management, but it'll also pay off because you'll come across like you've got a plan to your staff. You'll give them more confidence doing that, and your vendors and everybody else. So when in doubt, take time to be proactive as opposed to reactive.
I'm going to finish off with this final thought because, of course, I'm going to save the last comment for myself. Innovate or die. My business has changed materially, significantly 7 times in 8 years. And every 60 to 90 days, something moves inside of my business system that is different than the time before. The things that I watch businesses fail and fuck up on repeatedly are the things I avoid at all costs in my business. And one of them is innovate at all costs. There are 3 criteria that we need for true success in business all the time. Get paid, grow, innovate. You do those 3, it ain't going to fail. Crew, thank you so much for coming on the live studio audience today. Another virtual business box lunch, just hit it right there. My brothers from other mothers, Matt and Paul, as always, thank you for riding shotgun. Gary, Justin, Ashley, Ovi, Jason, thanks for joining us. Live studio audience that was with us. There we go. Greg, you just chirped in. Thank you, brother. You got that too. I am your host, Mitch Kamich, the Savage in Business. This is Mitch Kamich Coaching's virtual business box lunch. We will see you next Friday at noon. And of course, follow along, like and subscribe. Do what we tell you to do here. If you don't, you're screwed. Otherwise, we bring smart people. We give you good advice. And we do it from where? The things that hurt us most. We don't just say, I think this is a good idea. No, chances are we screwed up at some point. And now we're doing something different because it worked out for the better. Go get some. Watch the previous episodes. And we will see you next week, Friday afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us. For the studio audience, you guys have brought it like always today. Let's get back out into the world and have a fantastic weekend.